have been brought about by the imperialist forces uh, globally. So I would like to welcome our guest, Chala. We had Chala on before in one of our previous episodes on Nigeria, and they host a podcast called Find the Signal. Chala, please let us know how you're doing.
Okay, thanks for having me. Yeah, well, everything is, on a personal level, everything is okay, but at least considering the wider scale, that's what we're going to be discussing. You get, the Nigerian society, as I can say, is in pretty, challenging position. You get, mostly because of like failing economic policies, high inflation, just poor governance, the main things that you see associated with like a new colonial government. You understand? Yeah, these are the actual, realities on the ground. But as much as possible, people are doing what they can to just get by, day to day. There's a there's a grace in that, you understand, there's a resilience in that. But at the same time, you know, we shouldn't really accept we shouldn't accept the status quo at all. Understand? So yeah, I am well. I'm glad for that. I appreciate that. But yeah, there are wider issues going on. You like saying that waiting we could discuss. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you for that. And that's a great introduction for this podcast episode that we got going on, and a great lead into the questions that we are going to try to tackle in regards to Nigeria's position currently. So, one of the first questions I would like to ask you is in regards to the temperature on the ground right now in Nigeria. What would you say is the sentiments and the morale right now of the everyday Nigerian?
Okay. I mean, like there are like a few ways we can look at this, based on the sentiment and morale. You get, there's the individual aspect, and I can say on that front, we are hopeful. There's that internal strength. You understand that however difficult things are, that we'll get by, you know. But on the wider scale, that's as if you're just considering like the wider group of people, I'll say the morale is kind of low. You get, simply because of the economic realities that we're facing. Understand, morale is low, but there's the hope about it. Now, when it comes to the sentiment of, at least from my observation, and my experience, just day to day, goings on, the sentiment is resent. There's a lot of resentment towards the government. There's a lot of resentment towards like the political figures.
Good afternoon, hello, good evening, good morning, whatever time you're watching this program today. We hope you are in good mental, physical, and spiritual space, and glad that you have decided to join us for this week's episode of Our Ancestors' Voices, a weekly program sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Welcome today for our very important topic: 56 years since they killed Fred Hampton, evaluating the movie Judas and the Black Messiah. 56 years since they killed Fred Hampton, evaluating the movie Judas and the Black Messiah. The movie, of course, depicts the relationship between Fred Hampton, the chairperson of the Illinois Black Panther Party, and William O'Neill, who was recruited by the Federal Bureau of Investigation to infiltrate the Black Panther Party. And of course, the relationship between those two Africans led to Fred Hampton and Mark Clark being murdered in a pre planned police raid on the morning of December 4th, 1969 at 4 a.m. And so the program today is going to be focused on the 2021 movie Judas and the Black Messiah, starring Daniel Kaluuya as Fred Hampton and LaKeith Stanfeld as William O'Neill. Um, this movie was one of the best movies depicting our liberation movement. I mean, it was, head and shoulders above all the rest. Some of the movies were just really not very good at all. Like the Malcolm X movie with Denzel Washington. That's a terrible depiction of Malcolm X's life. And if people are depending on that movie to develop their understanding of who Malcolm X was and what he did, you're not doing that in the slightest by watching that movie. But this movie, Judas and the Black Messiah, was much, much better, but it still had serious shortcomings. And the shortcomings are not a reflection of any ill will on the part of the movie makers. One of the people that was involved in helping develop this movie is known to me. I know him, and he knows me, and um, he had talked to me about this project multiple times when it was in the making. And I know that this person has good intentions, but they're a filmmaker. They're not someone that's involved in the African liberation movement. So that statement in and of itself is going to help you understand that there are going to be shortcomings if you combine the capitalist nature of Hollywood movie production with the fact that people, no matter who they are, I don't care if it was these folks, if it was um, the Hughes brothers or Regina King or Ava DuVernay or Tyler Perry, whoever the hell it is, none of those people are involved in the African liberation struggle. So that tells me automatically that there are going to be some serious shortcomings in whatever product they produce. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today as it relates to the movie Judas and the Black Messiah, because there are some very subtle things that most people would miss that you certainly need to be aware of in terms of evaluating what the movie says, especially if you're not reading any of the actual literature about what happened to Fred Hampton and you're relying on movies, which unfortunately too many of us do, to get any type of understanding of what happened. So we're glad that you're here today to join us for that. And we give honor and respect to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. We're thankful for their continued direction. I just watched a video a couple of days ago talking about the refusal of the Lakota people to accept a monetary bribe for the theft of the Pahasafa or the Black Hills in South Dakota. And this is inspirational, especially at a time when um, so many self-serving African people in this country are trying to get a check for reparations, sell out the legacy of our struggle, our people's history and struggle for a check. It's important and inspirational to look at the indigenous people who have, for decades, refused to do that. There's a very important lesson to be learned there. But of course, they are connected to their history and culture. And those of us Africans in the US are not. So for us, we don't feel the pain of our ancestors. We don't feel our connection to Africa. We don't feel how stealing us from there has placed us in the dire moral and spiritual position and physical position that we occupy today. So, because we don't feel that, we're just simply trying to engage in our day-to-day life the way capitalism has trained us to be hustlers, to try to get that bag, to do everything to get paid. And so we see reparations as another hustle, an opportunity to get paid. We don't see it as a statement about the dignity of the legacy of the struggle of our people and our ancestors. We don't see it like that. We don't even understand anything about that. And so they give us inspiration there, if we pay attention to it, about the proper way to understand who we are as human beings and how we move forward. So we give honor to them for that. And we also, of course, equally connected, give honor to our African ancestors. That's why we will never sell out the legacy of our struggle for a goddamn check. We just won't do that. We'll never do that. And we will continue to call out the people that will, because this is an insult and it's very offensive to those of us who have spent time studying our history, understanding our history, and most importantly, participating in our struggle for liberation. People who do those things could never accept a check to serve as some sort of quote unquote compensation for our people's suffering. There's not enough money on the planet Earth that can pay us back for what our people have suffered. And if you're talking about any type of reparations, because some people are just really lame in terms of their ability to think. And so when they hear people talking the way I'm talking right now, well, you don't want any type of reparation. Nobody said that. But what we are saying is that any question of reparations has to be framed within the context of the struggle for one unified socialist Africa, because it was Africa that was raped that created the conditions where we're even talking about reparations for slavery right now. And all these colored people talking about they were Native Americans, you can't be talking about this sham reparations thing because you claim you were never slaves. So you can't even be talking about that. But it's not like those people doing that are going to get out the line and say, well, no, I don't expect to get any money because I was never, my people were never slaves. No, they'll be right at the front of the line trying to get money because everything in this society is about getting the bag, lying about your identity to have the potential to get money, lying about everything to have the potential to get paid. That's all this society. It's a completely worthless, shallow, decadent, and criminal society. That's all it is. And anyone trying to integrate into it and make themselves a part of it is just a shameful, disgusting, and ignorant human being. And our job is to do everything we can to lift people up out of that condition. Not saying that people don't have the ability to do that, but saying it's going to require work. Everybody has the ability to do that, but it's going to require work because all we've learned our whole lives is that the only thing we can do of any substance is integrate ourselves into this very backward capitalist system, which is the reason why we're in the position we're in right now in the first place. So we're glad that you're joining us. Introductions, always accidentally hit the mute button. So we do our slight introductions just to let you know who we are. And have to do some work on this slide because it keeps shifting on me. But Our Ancestors' Voices is sponsored each week, each time, same place, All African People's Revolutionary Party, AAPRP. And this organization, the AAPRP, is a revolutionary, independent, mass, pan-African political party with its base in Africa. Nowhere else but Africa, the national home of African people and people of African descent, 2.5 billion people scattered and suffering all over the planet Earth. And our objective to alleviate that suffering is to achieve the revolutionary objective of Pan-Africanism, which we define correctly as one united socialist Africa, one government in Africa operating under scientific socialism. That is the objective, which will fulfill the needs and aspirations of African people everywhere. That is the objective, which, when achieved, will overnight eliminate this false. I'm native to the Americas identity. And I can say that confidently because there is no way on earth, any of you listening that say you're native to the Americas and you without question are African, any of you listening, you know damn well if Africa was free, united, socialist, strong, and the US was a poor society, and in order for Africa to be united and socialist, that would mean the US would have to be a poor society because all the wealth here is the result of theft from Africa. So once that transition is complete, and this is a poor country, there's no way in hell that I'm ever going to believe that you're going to be trying so hard to identify with a poor country with no resources. You're not going to do that because all you're trying to do by identifying with the United Snakes of America is identify with a winner because everybody wants to identify with a winner. But this country is not a winner, it's a thief. It's like someone stealing your house and your family, and then I'm with them just because they have the wealth of your house and the wealth your family produce, but that's only a small fraction of the story. The real story is you need to get your house and your family back and your wealth back, and then there's no way you would need or want to identify with them. That's all we're talking about, you all. We are not confused. Our Ancestors' Voices is hosted each week by myself, Ajamu, and my biological, ideological daughter, Dr. Shakura Umi, and welcome her back after a couple of weeks gone, preparing for her trip soon to socialist Cuba. So to get us started, I will turn it over to Shakura.
Greetings. Hello, everyone. Good to see you and good to be back. Thank you, Baba Ajamu. So, we are here today to talk about the Black Panther Party and Fred Hampton. It is important to note that from the inception, a year from the inception, through the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in Lowndes County, Alabama, in 1965, the Oakland Black Panther Party, founded by Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale, started in October of 1966 in Oakland, California. In 1967, Bob Brown of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee helped to create the Illinois Black Panther chapter with the help of Kwame Ture, or formerly known as Stokely Carmichael, and others. Fred Hampton was recruited from the Maywood, Illinois NAACP to join the Black Panther Party. When Bob Brown, Kwame, and others left the Black Panther Party to go in a different direction, which ended up being the All African People's Revolutionary Party and Pan Africanist work, Hampton continued becoming the chairperson of the Illinois Black Panther Party chapter. Here's a picture of Bob Brown speaking on the history of the Black Power movement in the United States and a high school aged Fred Hampton. And it is important to note, you all, that we say this every single weekend that we do these seminars, and even the weekends where we might miss a seminar or where one of us may not be here, but we are always trying to push to you the importance of being in an organization that is working for justice. And I'm really seeing the strong examples of why that statement is so critically important. We were just talking about a comrade who has traveled to one of the locations to help out some of our comrades who are dealing with land theft and colonization and neocolonialism. And the comrade doesn't have the instituted principles that one should have when they are going on trips such as the one this person is going on. And just understanding, without you knowing all the details, it's important to understand that there hasn't been any prior organization or planning involved with this. There hasn't been any political education development, right? This person is a part of a work study circle, but I would argue even that is, kind of tricky in terms of their consistency and being able to read. And so we don't necessarily encourage folks to have a plan and not really build it up as best that they can. And so this is why, we've been saying from time and time again, join an organization that is working for justice. And if you pay attention throughout the weeks, you can see that whether we're talking about Fred Hampton, whether we're talking about Bob Brown, we're talking about Kwame Ture, if we're talking about Ella Baker, if we're talking about Miss Fannie Lou Hamer, it doesn't matter. Malcolm X, it doesn't matter. All of these individuals, Carlotta, who was a part of the Cuban Revolution fight, all of these individuals have been in at least one organization, if not many, 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 many more. If not many, 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 many more. And the common denominator that you should see from that is that even if you decide that you don't believe in the organization anymore, it's okay if you change. It's okay if you decide to go organize somewhere else. That is precisely the point, is we want you to continue organizing, even if it is not with us or if it is not with another organization. And so we just hope that you're paying attention to that. We hope that you're seeing the connections between the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and the Black Panther Party. Mind you, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee was in Alabama, and that Oakland chapter was founded in California. But this is what it's all about. Organizations that are leaning on each other, organizations that are relying on each other, building off of one another, understanding that this fight is not just their fight. I am so humbled to do more and more research as I learn more about the Panthers, as I learn more about the Brown Berets, as I learn more about the American Indian movement. And imagine my humble surprise, but also my content when I realized that the Brown Berets, the American Indian movement, and the Panthers, they all relied on one another, especially during that 1960s era. They were relying on one another for policy development. They were relying on one another for development of mission and values and statement and goals. What was the organization's intention? What were the targeted populations? Why are they able to stand on principle and to focus on the things? And if you listen to interviews from Huey P. Newton or Bobby Seale, if you listen to interviews from Clyde Belcourt or other founders of the American Indian movement, they will all say the same thing, that they looked to other organizations as they continued to kind of influence what their direction was, what their mission was, what it was that they wanted to do, and how they wanted to execute that. So it's really important to see that it's not just about us. This is why we should always remember that our fight is connected to someone else's. And I think just keeping that in mind, remaining as humble as possible to see that, is only going to help us grow stronger, and it's going to help us understand that we're not alone. We're not alone. Even if you decide that you're not ready to be in an organization, you have to understand right here, right now, you are not alone. Clearly, if you were in an organization, you would probably feel more of a connection. But my point is, you have to understand that you are not alone. And because you are not alone, that's why this is bigger than you. That's why it's not just about you, and it's not just about your people, because there are so many other groups who could see some connections based on what has happened to your people and what has happened to them. So we have to understand that and just think a little bit more deeply about that. Think about all the students in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and how they risked so much for us to be sitting here today. They risked so much for us to be sitting here today, for us to be able to choose where we go to eat, for us to be able to choose what kind of internet service we want. They were sitting in sit-ins, being spit on and pulled. Their hair was being tugged. They were being harassed. They were being physical threats, but also physical assaults and things of that nature. These were students, you all, students who knew that they wanted a better world. And because of that, they fought to do just that. And these students then continued to grow and decided to continue organizing. That's what it's all about, you all. That is what it is all about. Next slide, please. So we have to continue to think deeply about that, deeply, deeply, deeply about that. And as I said, if we're not in a position to join an organization that's working for justice, then we can at least start to research how all these organizations are connected. And maybe we can decide that for the next 6 months, we're going to pick one organization per month and donate a specific amount of money to said organization. And the next month we'll choose a different one, and so on and so forth. Because if you understand the importance of us all connecting and linking together, then surely you understand that this work is important, but also expensive. important and expensive. And when you were colonized and when you were neo-colonized, you do not have multiple expendable income. You just don't, because capitalism makes sure to put blockades on your country or to make sure that you can't get access to certain resources. That's all by design too. So because of that, we know that we need to fund this work. We know that it's not going to fund itself. And we know that the people doing this work are volunteers. They are not getting paid to do this work. So because of that, this is why we understand that the Zoom accounts need to be managed. We understand that we need to make sure that we have resources in place to pay for the events, to pay for the speaker fees, to pay for the food, because people need to be fed when they come to these events. Like, these are the things that we have to think about, you all. And this is also why we have to keep doing this work, because we know that we are unstoppable, contrary to what the US government might want to make us think. And on that note, we'll move into the slide currently, where we think about how the US government killed Fred Hampton. And so we start with understanding that Fred Hampton's work as the chair of the Illinois Black Panther Party was creative. It was insightful. There was so much bravery displayed. It was also productive work. The number of people in the Chicago area who rallied behind this very young leader caused the Federal Bureau of Investigation, or what you might know as the FBI, to make him one of the primary targets for elimination. And we know that that sounds very familiar, because that was the same rhetoric with Malcolm X. That was the same rhetoric with Dr. Martin Luther King. It was the same rhetoric with Fidel Castro. It was the same rhetoric with so many other comrades. You can take your pick and take a name and plug it in there. If they were basically doing something to benefit all humanity and to deconstruct and destroy selfish, greedy capitalism, then they were probably on that list, and they probably had to be stopped because of that, right? Like, we could just fill that blank in with any person who has ever stood up for something because they knew it was best for humanity, even if it went against the systemic oppression that we all were experiencing, right? And so Fred Hampton was no different. That's why he was a priority target at that point for elimination. So first, what they did was they framed Fred of attempting to steal $71 from an ice cream truck in Chicago, but that did not yield long-term results. But they continued, and they had an insertion of William O'Neill, who was an informant in the Panther chapter, and that produced the results that they were looking for. So, like, this is why we have to continue to think about, what does all of this mean in the grand scheme of things? How are we positioning ourselves? What's the purpose of why we're doing what we're doing? What motivates us? What drives us? What continues for us to remember why this work is important? How do we take care of ourselves in the process, but also continue to stay true to it, so that we can hopefully recognize behavior that a potential informant is displaying? And it might make us start to wonder, what's going on here? You know what I mean? Or maybe we're in a position where we don't recognize it, but at least if we're communicating constantly, and again, if we have policies in place that we can rely on, if we're thinking about how we can create trainings to potentially recognize informant behavior, like, this is what that means, you all, being proactive. And again, we are not faulting the Black Panther Party for that. That's not their fault. What we have a responsibility of doing is learning from how the federal government destroy the Panthers, so that we can try our best to prevent that from happening again for future organizations that exist currently, that are functioning well, and that are doing something to fight oppression for the masses of people everywhere. This picture here that you see on the slide is Richard Held. And this was one of the FBI officials who reported to William Sullivan, who then reported to J. Edgar Hoover. And Held, like Roy Mitchell, was assigned to sabotage the Black Panther Party. So the next time we talk about, FBI informants and people who are infiltrating our systems to destroy us and to prevent us from advancing, or to prevent us from helping our individuals and our masses to advance, like, this is what that looks like. And this is also why we always say, like, we understand at this point as an organization that we do not trust any entity that affiliates with Europe, that affiliates with Israel, that affiliates with the US, because they not only support capitalism, they also support the destruction and elimination of a lot of our key warrior players that have not only instilled and sacrificed for us, but also have taught us that it's on us to continue the fight now that they are no longer physically with us. We can still rely on them to get information and to influence our future decisions. But I would say the very first decision that they would want us to consider is now, how can we do something to contribute to this fight, because they're no longer here? For whatever reason, they are no longer here based on the work that they have done. And it's up to us to continue that work. So this is what that looks like, you all. This is how that looks, kind of thinking about what the next steps are and trying to think about what we can do to be different. How can we contribute? What skills do we have that might be beneficial at this point? You know, we talked a few weeks ago about ways that you can donate and support Pan-Africanist organizations, but we should also mention, or if you think that you have a special set of skills that we might benefit from, we have that on our website where we ask you, you know, what are some skills that you think you are really good at that we might be able to benefit from? Are you really good at making flyers? Are you really good at facilitating and emceeing events? Are you really good at flyering and speaking to people when you are passing out propaganda? Like, we need all the help that we can get. So just thinking about yourself and thinking about how you can contribute to a wider, broader movement beyond yourself. How can you make a difference? You still have time. It is not too late. You still have time. It is not too late. And part of that, I would argue, is telling the correct story about what happened to Fred Hampton. Ashe.
Ashe, obrigada, asante sana, midasi. Thank you very much. And we will continue on as soon as I can figure out how to work my computer. Sorry. All right. So let's start again, because we want to talk about the movie Judas and the Black Messiah from 2021. And we want to talk about it in the context of these movies that come out of this capitalist system that feature people who are a part of our liberation movement, our African liberation movement. And before we get to the Judas movie, it's important to start with just looking at some of these other movies. Like I said in the beginning, that the Malcolm X movie from Spike Lee in 1992 was very mediocre. And I'm not saying that against Spike Lee. He's a great filmmaker. He produced, I still think, School Days and Do the Right Thing are two of the best films I've ever seen and have the biggest influence on me, both of them. But he's a filmmaker. He's not a revolutionary. He's not even an activist. And so those of us that are those things, when we watch these films, we see the contradictions that come out, that are going to come out from someone making a movie who's not a part of our liberation struggle. So, you know, one of the biggest weaknesses of the Malcolm X movie is, and I've seen it a number of times, very good movie. Obviously, Denzel Washington's a great actor, and there were tons of Angela Bassett. There was tons of talent in that movie, but they never really explained the work that Malcolm did those last 11 months of his life. The most of that movie focused on pre-conscious Malcolm, Malcolm Little, and then his time within the Nation of Islam, and then the time after the Nation of Islam was just, you know, really like the last portion of the movie. So they didn't really focus on that. When those of us who were Pan-Africanists and revolutionaries, we would argue that those last 11 months of Malcolm's life were the most significant in terms of the contribution that he made. And so since the movie didn't really focus on that, other than, you know, they showed Malcolm going to Ghana and having, you know, briefly doing that. And they did that in the Ali movie too, where they showed the conflict between Will Smith playing Ali and Mario Van Peebles playing Malcolm. They showed a little of that, but, you know, they focused mostly on Malcolm's Hajj to you know, to Arabia and that sort of thing. So they didn't really, unless you've studied the work that Malcolm was engaged in, like the movie show didn't even mention Kwame's work with Kwame, or I'm sorry, Malcolm's work with Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana, Malcolm's work with Sekou Touré, his work in Tanzania with Julius Nyerere. None of his Pan-African work was even mentioned in the Malcolm X movie. So in the scene in the movie where he's in Egypt, they don't even though they show him in Egypt, they don't show the reason why he was there was to meet with Gamal Abdel Nasser. the great Pan-Africanist Arab leader in Egypt. They don't even mention that. So you see in the movie the CIA agents following him, but if you don't know the history, you have to ask, well, what did he do that they felt that they needed to follow him? Because they didn't even really talk about his work. So if you are doing a movie about Malcolm and you don't talk about the work he was doing to build an international Pan-Africanist revolutionary movement, then you don't do it justice, because these are the things he was doing that got him killed. You don't do that. And they show nothing to illustrate that. And so you leave the movie with the same tired, discredited narrative that it was the Nation of Islam that killed Malcolm X, and that was it. And a lot of you still believe that to this day because you don't know the history, and people rely on this movie to provide it to them, and you're not going to get it from these movies. That's the whole point. You're not going to get it. They didn't even in the movie show Malcolm meeting with Fidel Castro, the leader of the Cuban Revolution. I mean, this was an African who was even just to not focus on that is insane to me, because this is an African who was a low-level criminal, talking about Malcolm. And he evolved to the point where he not only met with one leader of a country, Fidel Castro, he met with several. I just mentioned Nyerere in Tanzania, Nasser in Egypt, Nkrumah in Ghana, Secretary in Guinea, and others. And everywhere he went where he did that, he was afforded diplomatic treatment. He was given a car and a chef. And these folks were doing that even though they knew it would uh, attract the anger of the U.S. government. So there was a reason why all this was happening, and Spike Lee's movie didn't even broach this. So if you don't know what I'm talking about right now, you don't know anything about Malcolm X, even if you've seen the movie 1,000 times. And then the Night in Miami, the movie about Malcolm, Muhammad Ali, Jim Brown, Sam Cooke. I mean, good movie, decent movie. A lot of it was dramatized, like they all are in these movies. But at the end of the movie, there was something shocking that happened that if you're not aware of it, you wouldn't have caught it. It just would have went into your subconscious, which influences how you see things, and then that influences your behavior. So when they ended the movie, they showed you a paragraph of what happened to the four men. They talked about Jim Brown retiring from football and going on into an acting career and continuing his level of activism. They talked about Ali continuing to, what happened to him with refusing to go to Vietnam. And, we all know Muhammad Ali's story, winning the championship 3 times. And I believe he's still the only person to ever be heavyweight champion 3 times. And then when they dealt with Malcolm, they just said he was assassinated on February 21st, 1965. And then when they talked about Sam Cooke, they talked about his business acumen and how he was one of the first, if not the first, Africans to have a major record label. But they didn't even tell you that Sam Cooke was shot and killed 2 months before Malcolm was. And most of us don't read and study, so we don't know that. And that the reason why Sam Cooke was killed was very questionable. Like the accusation, it was an African woman that shot him and killed him, a hotel manager. And there was a Filipina that Sam Cooke allegedly had in his hotel room. And the woman escaped, and she accused Sam Cooke of kidnapping her. And the African woman saw enough evidence, at least in her mind, to validate that. And so when Sam Cooke allegedly got hostile with her, in her words, she shot him in self-defense. Now, I'm not making any judgment. I wasn't there. I don't know, but what I am saying is that it was interesting that the movie chose to highlight Malcolm's death in the end without doing the same to Sam Cooke. And the only conclusion I can take from that is the same backward narrative that if you decide to stand up against this system like Malcolm, you will be killed. But you don't see the necessity to mention that Sam Cooke was killed over allegedly some nonsense. Malcolm wasn't killed over some nonsense. He was killed because he dared stand up against U.S. capitalism. The bravest thing you can do as a human being in this modern epoch of society. And so that's interesting. And it's important to look at these things, you all, because Ava DuVernay, for example, made the One Night in Miami. Spike Lee made the Malcolm X movie. And in order to get movies produced in Hollywood, you have to have buy-in from the movie studios. A lot of you probably know the story with the Malcolm movie. Spike Lee had to solicit contributions from African celebrities like Oprah Winfrey and Michael Jordan and those types of people. Okay, that money comes with strings attached to it. In order for any movie to get produced in Hollywood, it has to pass through the yeses of the European Hollywood establishment. Though these aren't independently produced films. So this is why you get this stuff. Like, I don't care how great Ava DuVernay is or Spike Lee is, they're not the people that have the final say on the products that they present. They're not the final people that get a say in that. So because they're not the final people that get a say in that, then they have to listen to the input of these movie production people. And that's why you have the type of ending you have, like in the Ava DuVernay movie. A lot of people don't understand that. So they're like, well, why are you criticizing Ava DuVernay? Look, I'm not that stupid. It's much bigger than her. This is a capitalist system that we're talking about. It's much bigger than her. So it's important that we understand COINTELPRO. And what I mean by that is we have to understand what this system actually represents, right? In terms of what that system was designed to do. And Shakur talked about the slide with Richard Held, who his son was an FBI agent as well, an FBI official. And between the two of them, they wreaked absolute havoc on the African liberation movement. And here in this picture in the upper left, you have J. Edgar Hoover and the real life Roy Mitchell, who was a field agent for the FBI. And then you have the actor who played Roy Mitchell in the movie, a gentleman named Jesse Plemons, who was in the movie Judas and the Black Messiah. And then the bottom picture is, LaKeith Stanfeld, who is one of my favorite actors. He's outstanding. Everything he does that I see, I mean, he's a very good actor. He portrayed William O'Neill, who's the real William O'Neill, is on the right. So we just want to break that down and talk about what all that means. So the most damaging element, and again, if you missed it, I talked about Judas and the Black Messiah it's in my book, it's at the top in terms of these movies on African liberation figures. It's the best one, but it still had serious problems. And I'm not blaming, I told you, I know one of the people involved in the production of that movie. Good person, good African person, good intentions, but he's not involved in the African liberation struggle, meaning he's not a part of an organization doing work to liberate our people. He's a filmmaker. Nothing wrong with that, but it's gonna leave some absences for those of us who know this, do the work, and understand the movement and the things that happen in the movement. There's no way you're gonna understand that to the same level if you're just making films and you're not studying our movement and you're not participating in it. That's just, I'm not going to disrespect myself and all the comrades and the people who have sacrificed so much to do this work by pretending that that's not true. It is true. So there are going to be damaging elements. So let's talk about them. The most damaging element was how the movie Judas and the Black Messiah dismissed the impact of the FBI in destabilizing the Black Panther Party. The movie focused almost entirely on the relationship between Fred Hampton, Daniel Kaluuya, and LaKeith Stanfeld, William O'Neill. And it ignored some elements and even misrepresented some things that are critical to your proper understanding. For example, Roy Mitchell, who's the top middle photo I mentioned, was the FBI field agent. And in the movie, he's talking with some FBI people, and they bring up the name of George Sams. George Sams was a notorious FBI informant on the East Coast in Connecticut during that same time. And when George Sams was mentioned, Jesse Plemons, who was playing Roy Mitchell, he expresses concern about George Sams. Like, oh my God, like that's not good. And I just want to make sure y'all understand, like George Sams was notorious. He ended up creating such sabotage in the Connecticut area Black Panther Party that a young man, Alex Rackley, was tortured and murdered. And he was nothing but a hardworking member of the Black Panther Party who was accused by George Sams of being a police informant and was tortured and murdered as a result of it. And then that led to the death of Sam Napier, who was the editor, the person who facilitated putting together the Black Panther Party's newspaper and created a string of deaths and attacks as a result of this. And George Sams proudly played that role, and Erica Huggins being arrested, who is a Black Panther Party Central Committee member, being arrested and have to go to trial as a result of all of this work by George Sams. Now, getting back to Roy Mitchell, this concern his character showed in the movie, in real life, 5 short years before that, Roy Mitchell was the field agent in charge of the investigation of the 3 civil rights workers who turned up missing in Philadelphia, Mississippi, and ended up murdered by the sheriff / Ku Klux Klan department in Philadelphia, Mississippi. Roy Mitchell was in charge of that investigation. And if you know that history, the FBI didn't do squat to find James Chaney, to find the 3 civil rights workers, the 2 white young workers from CORE, and James Chaney from SNCC. He did nothing. Schwerner, Michael Schwerner and Andrew Goodman, the 2 white young gentlemen, and James Chaney, he did nothing to find them. It was the SNCC workers, people like Kwame Ture, that found that truck in that granite pile, and the bodies still in it, the 3 bodies in it. Roy Mitchell didn't do a damn thing to do that and wasn't concerned about it. And even in the backward ass movie Mississippi Burning, where they tried to make the FBI heroes, if you analyze the movie, you know the history if you study it yourself and compare it to that movie. The FBI did nothing but stand around on street corners, quoting Julian Bond, stand around on street corners and take notes while African and European civil rights workers were being brutalized on the street. So Roy Mitchell wasn't concerned about what happened to our organizers and our activists in the field. He wasn't concerned about any of that. And to suggest that he was in that movie subtly gives the impression that the FBI was somehow interested in justice, and the FBI existed to sabotage the African liberation movement. J. Edgar Hoover said that clearly, that was his objective, being director of the FBI. And all of his minions under him, like Roy Mitchell, Richard Held, who was on the previous flyer, William Deloach, Sullivan, or Carthage Deloach rather, and William Sullivan, all of them were racist, were rabid racists, and were committed terrorists to sabotaging the African liberation movement. And we have to understand that and not let this subtleness get in our brains and influence our thinking. And also in the movie, Stanfeld, who played William O'Neill, the informant, you got to understand the history of what happened with William O'Neill. He had been involved in car theft. And what the FBI does is they bring people in and they give them an option. You either go to jail for stealing a car. We got you dead to rights. You're going to jail. You either go to, accordingly, what happened with William O'Neill is they told him, your black ass is going to jail, quote unquote. Or you can help us, and not only will you not go to jail, but we'll pay you, you'll get a stipend as a result. So the average unconscious person is going to go for the latter option. And that's what William O'Neill did. So he infiltrated the Black Panther Party. Now, we've talked a lot about the Black Panther Party. We're heavily influenced by the Black Panther Party. We have nothing but love and respect, but we also are clear-minded enough and do the intense research to understand the errors that the Black Panther Party made. Now, myself, I've been mentored all my life by Black Panther Party members all over the world, and they have been honest about the mistakes they made. And every book that any one of them wrote, they addressed that. From Assata Shakur, her book, Elaine Brown's book, David Hilliard's book, Huey P. Newton's book, Bobby Seale's book, Kwame Ture's book, Geronimo G. Jaga's book, they all the brother, I can't remember his name right now, but he was a part of Huey Newton's hit squad in the 70s. They all have been honest in their books, and I've read all of them, and you should too. Because one of the things that came out about that is that they acknowledged in each case the Black Panther Party had serious shortcomings that made it much easier for the FBI to come in and sabotage their work. Assata Shakur could not have been more clear in her book Assata in talking about the ideological shortcomings within the Black Panther Party. She talked about it in great depth in her book. If you read it, she talked about how the people were so egotistical and narrow-minded that they didn't even want a poster for African Liberation Day in the New York office because they said it was counter-revolutionary because it wasn't Marxist-Leninist in their mind, right? That kind of juvenile ideological development, that was what was dominant. And so, we can't escape the blame. We have blame as well. But we most of the time we understand our shortcomings. We don't include the contribution of our enemies in sabotaging us. We don't include that. So that's why we're focusing on that. And so Stanfeld talked, he in one scene, a couple of scenes in the movie, he has mental stress about the sabotage that he's bringing. Like I know the one scene where the Roy Mitchell character asks him for a layout of Fred Hampton's bedroom, which in real life William O'Neill provided to the FBI agent Roy Mitchell, who provided it to the Chicago police. So that that's why uh, all of the 99 shots that were fired by the police into Fred Hampton's apartment went towards his headboard because they knew exactly where it was based on the diagram that William O'Neill provided to them. Okay. So in the scene in the movie, though, after, this diagram is asked for by the FBI man, LaKeith Stanfield playing William O'Neill, he has this stressful moment, this moral conflict, right? He doesn't want to do it, right? He has this moment in the film. And again, just like the film, the scene with Roy Mitchell, this has great potential to cause damage because it suggests that there's some humanity towards sabotage against our liberation movements. And in real life, there was a documentary, y'all, that was filmed in 1989. And in fact, the picture of the real William O'Neill there is from him being interviewed for that documentary, which was called Eyes on the Prize. It's on YouTube. You should look at it, see for yourself. But in that movie, William O'Neill, or documentary, William O'Neill was asked how he would define his legacy in the Black Panther Party. And his response is that, I quote, "I made a strong contribution to the Black Panther Party. I think they had good intentions, but they were misled." That's what the man said. He didn't have any remorse about what he did. He tried to rebrand himself as a hero in our liberation movement because he supplied the information that got Chairman Fred Hampton and Deputy Defense Minister Mark Clark murdered on December 4th, 1969. And he had some kind of conflict. Maybe he felt it at some point because in the next year, 1990, he made his second attempt to run out on a freeway in front of running cars. He failed the first time, but when he did it in 1990, a car ran over him and killed him. So he had some mental conflict, but it wasn't enough for him to go from 1969 to 1990, 21 years without ever revealing his role in working for the FBI and sabotaging the deaths of these two young men, 21 years old and 22 years old, respectively. He didn't have that much remorse because he went 21 years without saying a word about it. Never once saying, I got some information. These people set us up and they caused these murders. I didn't know it was going to happen, whatever he wanted to say. So the evidence that we have, you can believe whatever you want to believe, but the evidence we have is that he defended his work within the Black Panther Party. That's documented in the documentary. So I have to go on that because that's all the evidence I have to go on. And that's just a fact. So if we keep going there are some very important takeaways, right? And one of the great takeaways here is that Fred Hampton was a great organizer. And people should look at his organizing work, his organizing skills. He learned he had been an organizer since he was 15 years old. We mentioned he was a member of the NAACP in Maywood, Illinois, and he was out there on the streets organized. So by the time he got to Bob Brown and Kwame Ture and them in the Black Panther Party, he was an established organizer, and he carried those skills forward in the Black Panther Party. His ability to organize the African community in Chicago is legendary. His ability to organize even among the gangs, the Vice Lords, the Peace Stone Nation in Chicago, legendary. People still talk about that today. He's still talked about by people in those street organizations today, 56 years later. His ability to form the original Rainbow Coalition that Jesse Jackson stole from him, right? The Young Lords, the Puerto Rican Youth Organization, the Patriot Party, the White Appalachian Organization, and the Black Panther Party. His ability to pull that together. These are the things that got this man killed, you all. His organizing ability. Because even if we don't recognize it, our enemies understand that organization decides everything. They understand that. So, drama aside, Hollywood's efforts to create content, it's interesting. You know, the movies are very interesting, but we have to understand that Fred Hampton wasn't just killed because he was larger than life. He was the outstanding organizer and leader, but the U.S. government killed him and everyone else they've killed, from Patrice Lumumba to Che Guevara to Muammar Gaddafi to Malcolm X and everyone else, because they fear a social movement they cannot control. They fear a social movement that is not beholden to them. You know, a lot of the stuff happening to now, the people have relationship with the police. The police are helping them organize the marches. That's not what they're afraid of. They know that that's not going to, that the potential for that to go beyond that, it's there, but it's limited. But organizational efforts that they have no control over, that's what they're primarily concerned with. They fear people recognizing their power, because when people organize independently and have victories, they recognize their power. And that's what the power structure fears, is us being able to do that. And the reality is that there is not a single corporate movie anywhere on earth, but especially coming out of Hollywood here in California, no matter how intention the movie is, no matter how much we like the people making the movie, all that is completely irrelevant. No matter how well the movie is managed, none of that is going to ever give us what we need to be inspired to become free. The primary purpose of Hollywood movies is to make money. That's it. And the people who gatekeep in that industry are going to make sure that that happens above all else. That's why you have never seen a movie where there's a revolution where colonized people win coming out of Hollywood. You've never seen that. And I'm going to tell you right now, you never will see that. You will never see a movie about our freedom fighters that doesn't have the type of discrediting type subtleties that I'm describing to you today. You'll never see a movie that doesn't include that. The movies they produce will always have that in there, because their job is to uphold the capitalist system and to produce movies that propagate upholding the capitalist system, not to show the capitalist system being overthrown and something better replacing it. You'll never see a movie like that coming out of Hollywood. That just simply, frankly, will never happen. And you cannot indicate one movie where that's been the case. I guarantee you, if you bring up a movie, I can show you why that's not what that movie is designed to do. You know, all of these movies, whether they're talking about Fred Hampton or whether they're dealing with the Black Panther movie, the comic book character, all of them are designed to separate us from Africa, because that's what that movie did. You know, subtly. Most of you didn't catch it. The last part of that movie where what's his name? The brother that played that passed away. I can't think of his name right now, but he flies into Oakland and the kids are playing, and he flies in a spaceship and they see the spaceship And they ask him, "Who are you?" at the end of the Black Panther movie. Now, common sense, if you were trying to make a movie to raise our people's consciousness, common sense would have him reply something like, "I'm your brother. I'm your family, coming here to work with you, to provide resources, to lift us up out of this condition that we're in." But he doesn't say a damn word in the movie. He just grins. That's Hollywood. That's typical Hollywood. He doesn't say anything to the youth. And so we don't even, if we see that and we don't catch that, you never thought of that until I just said it, then when you see the youth, that's what you're going to do, is not say anything, because that's the conditioning that they're there to do, you all. I know we don't understand that. I know it's a lot for us to take in, but if you study what they do in Hollywood, out of Hollywood, it's irrefutable. And so, I just want to mention that counterintelligence is not something that happened in 1969. It doesn't happen now. And we'll talk about the program we have next week. But this marching towards violence, the domestic anti-Israeli protest movement by this clown, Ryan Morrow, this is what COINTELPRO looks like in 2025 and beyond, where right-wing fascist thinkers do work that demonizes revolutionaries and radical activists. So this is a report that identifies 150 organizations that just came out that is being by this Capital Research Center. And it calls all of these organizations domestic terrorists. And of course, the All African People's Revolutionary Party is fronting one of the organizations, like many others, like Students for Justice in Palestine, that are identified in this report. And this is what COINTELPRO looks like, to make you think and make your family think, even if you don't think, that we're terrorists. So that when they see this and then they see you on this program that you're on right now, they're like, that's a terrorist group. Don't do that. And a lot of people are going to be afraid. So they're going to listen to that to some degree. And this is why organization, you all, is so important. And that's why we want to ask you to come back next week, December 14th, same time, same place. That's the wrong title. Apologize for that. Actually, the title, what we're going to do next week is talk about what I just talked about. We're going to talk about that report, Marching Towards Violence. We're going to dissect it and illustrate for you what it is designed to do. So please join us next Sunday. Apologize for the incorrect title. The QR code in the upper left-hand corner, the red and white one, has all of the AAPRP programs, this one included. So check that out. Scan that QR code. It has the Forward Ever Shop. Y'all going to be spending money for this capitalist holiday coming up this month. So if you're going to do that, buy some clothes that do two things. Number one, provide positive messaging, pro-humanity messaging. And then number two, concretely supports the work of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. So go to the Forward Ever Shop, scan that QR code and do that. Go to hoodcommunist.org, Revolutionary Pan-African blog, do that. If you're in the Sacramento area, or some people that are, we have self-defense classes, community self-defense, I should say it. That's the correct way to say it. Every Thursday night from 6 to 8 p.m. That's Pacific time. The location is 2775 Cottage Way, like cottage cheese, Cottage, Cottage Way, Unit 15, 2775 Cottage Way, Unit 15. We were just able to acquire some tools to help us begin sparring, because people are coming and they're ready to spar. So we have headgear and gloves so they can begin doing that. And we're doing community self-defense. So we encourage you to come out. We encourage you to join the All African People's Revolutionary Party. You can do so by going to aaprp-intl.org. You watch a video, get information on that. And the black QR code in the bottom right for our AAPRP work on the ground in the Sahel, in Africa, in Burkina Faso and Niger, and soon Mali. We are asking you to become a monthly sponsor to that program, that you can find out by scanning that QR code on the bottom right, the black and white one, and pay as much as you can every month. And the money is used to buy revolutionary books for our people to read in Africa. So they have books that can help us organize revolutionary consciousness They're not just reading Huck Finn and See Dick Run and See Jane Run, because those are the books that are over there, because the only people up to this point who have money to take large-scale books to Africa are these Christian mercenary people. So, of course, they're not going to provide any revolutionary literature for our people. They're trying to keep our people enslaved. So go ahead and become a monthly sponsor it's called Burkina Books there. And then finally, my book, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. Scan the QR code next to the book title. It's only $8 US. 100% of, at first, it's a great book talking about organizing, but 100% of the proceeds go towards equipment, supplies, gas money for all the anti-fascist work that we do here, stopping these white supremacist groups. So buy the book if you have it already. Get other people to buy it. Start book clubs. Read it, because you should read it too. And then also call your library, ask them to order it. Call your local bookstore, ask them to order it. Help us build this work, you all. Forward ever, backwards never. Enjoy the rest of your day.